My girlfriend told the court. He's trying to control me, after I asked where our money was going. I quietly ended every financial commitment, then smiled when her attorney said, "Can we talk before this goes any further?" I still remember the exact moment I realized something was wrong. It was a Tuesday night, and I was sitting at our kitchen table with my laptop open, trying to balance the shared bills before the rent came due. Nothing about the apartment looked dramatic or suspicious. There was a half-finished grocery list on the counter. Her boots were by the door. The dishwasher was running. The cheap lamp in the corner was making the whole place look yellow and tired. It was just another night in a regular American apartment, the kind with a thin hallway, a noisy fridge, and a landlord who texted instead of fixing things. I had paid the electric bill. I had paid my car insurance. I had already moved my paycheck into the joint account we used for rent and household stuff. That part had been our system for almost 3 years. We each kept our own checking accounts. We each sent in the same amount every payday. It was supposed to make life easier. It had actually worked pretty well for a long time. That was the part that made all of this so embarrassing. It was not like I woke up one day and decided not to trust her. I trusted her because I loved her. I trusted her because she had always seemed more organized than me. I trusted her because she talked about the future in a way that made it sound like we were building something solid. Tessa handled the grocery shopping. Tessa paid the internet bill. Tessa kept a little spreadsheet for the apartment expenses, or at least she said she did. I handled the utilities and the car stuff. It seemed balanced. It seemed grown up. It seemed like one of those boring adult arrangements that only becomes important when it breaks. The first thing I noticed was that our joint account was lower than it should have been. At first, I thought I had missed one of my own transfers. Then I checked again and saw that the numbers did not make sense. I did the math 3 times. We should have had more than enough for rent, groceries, the water bill, and the little cushion we kept in there for emergencies. Instead, the account was almost empty. I clicked through the recent activity and saw a pattern I did not understand. There were cash withdrawals. There were transfers I did not recognize. There were several small payments to an online cash app. There was a transfer to a personal account I had never seen before. I stared at the screen so long that the laptop went dim. I remember feeling stupid before I felt angry. That is the part people never talk about enough. Confusion comes first. Humiliation comes right after. Anger usually comes later, after your brain has already started trying to protect itself. I did not storm into the bedroom. I did not slam anything. I waited until she came home from work. I asked her as evenly as I could where the money was going. I did not accuse her of stealing. I did not call her names. I just asked for an explanation because the account did not line up with what we had agreed to. The reaction was immediate. She froze for a second, then got defensive in that careful way people do when they are trying not to look. Defensive. She said I was watching her too closely. She said I was turning into one of those guys who needed to know every detail. She said money was not the issue and that I was making it one by asking questions. I remember standing there in the kitchen holding a grocery receipt while she told me that. It was such a small object to be holding during something that ended up changing my life. I still kept my voice low. I told her I only wanted to know where the shared money was going. I told her that if there was a reason, I would understand it. I told her I was not trying to fight. She rolled her eyes and said I always acted like I was her boss. That sentence hit harder than the money itself. I had never thought of myself that way, not even close. I worked a regular salary job. She worked full-time too. I never tracked her phone. I never asked for passwords. I never told her where to go or who to see. I had always thought I was the easygoing one. That night ended with her taking a shower and me sitting on the couch with my laptop open again, pretending to look at the budget while actually just staring at the same 3 tabs over and over. I did not sleep much. The next morning, I started looking harder. I am not naturally the suspicious type. That is not me being noble. It is me admitting that I can be slow to catch things when I want them not to be true. I had a bad habit of explaining things away. I told myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe she had paid a utility deposit. Maybe she had fronted money for groceries and reimbursed herself. Maybe the app charges were just moving money between her own accounts. I wanted there to be a clean answer. There was not. The bank statements made less sense the longer I looked. The withdrawals were not random. They happened on the same days our checks came in. Money was leaving the joint account and going to places I did not recognize. There were online transfers with vague labels. There was a payment to a furniture store. There was a payment to a medical billing company. There was a transfer to someone whose last name I did not know. There were a few cash withdrawals from Adams across town that I had never been to. The weirdest part was that none of it had been discussed. There had been no conversation about a big purchase. There had been no mention of a family emergency. There had been no warning that we were suddenly behind on anything. I checked the paperless notices in the bank app and found one email I had ignored a week earlier. It was a low-stakes-looking message about a new linked external account. That was when I felt my stomach drop. I clicked into it and realized that someone had linked a separate account to the joint one. It was in her name, not ours, just hers. I sat back so fast my chair hit the wall behind me. I did not feel betrayed in the dramatic movie sense. I felt something much worse. I felt stupid, because now the whole setup looked different. Now it looked less like a shared system and more like a way to move money around while keeping me calm enough not to ask too many questions. I still tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. I asked her again that evening, this time with the statements in front of me. I laid them on the table and pointed to the transfers. I told her I was seeing transactions I did not understand. I told her I wanted to go through the account line by line. That was the moment she changed the tone completely. Before that, she had sounded annoyed. After that, she sounded offended. She said I was auditing her like an employee. She said she was tired of being treated like she needed permission. She said I had started all of this because I needed to feel in charge. That sentence stuck with me because I knew it was false, and yet it still made me doubt myself for a minute. That is what manipulation does when it is done well. It makes you take a normal request and wonder whether you are secretly the bad guy. I went quiet because I knew arguing was not going to help. She saw me going quiet and took it as proof she was right. She stormed into the bedroom and shut the door. I stayed in the kitchen and read the bank history again. I found a charge from a payment app that turned out to be connected to a separate credit card. I found a small monthly transfer to a personal savings account that I had never been told about. I found a few cash withdrawals that lined up with days she had said she was doing groceries, but came back with almost nothing. I found enough to know something was wrong, but not enough to know the full shape of it yet. That was the part that really bothered me. I did not know whether she was hiding spending, hiding debt, helping someone else, or just trying to keep money away from me for reasons I did not understand. All I knew was that she had not been honest. I slept on the couch that night because I could not stand lying in the same bed and pretending everything was normal. In the morning, I did something I had never thought I would have to do in my own relationship. I made a folder. I saved screenshots. I downloaded statements. I created a timeline on my laptop with dates, amounts, and notes. It sounds paranoid when I say it now. It felt practical then. I was trying to keep my head clear. I was trying to make sure I remembered what happened instead of just remembering how bad it felt. I also started looking at the other bills in my name. That is when I realized how many things were still tied together. Her phone was on my plan. The internet account was under her name, but I had been paying half through the joint account. The renter's insurance was billed from my card. One streaming service was on my credit card. The storage unit we had rented for some old furniture was also on my card because she had been the one who signed us up and I had forgotten about it. There was nothing dramatic about any one item. Taken together, it was a web. I had let convenience turn into dependence. That was on me. I do not say that to blame myself for her choices. I say it because one of the reasons this story ended the way it did was that I finally understood how much of my own financial life I had handed over to routine. I called my brother that afternoon and told him something was off. Not everything. Just enough. He listened, then told me in his usual blunt way to pull my own money out of anything I did not fully control. He had been through a nasty divorce years earlier and had become weirdly wise about paper trails. He told me not to fight in the apartment. He told me not to yell. He told me to document everything and keep my tone boring. He told me boring wins in court. That stuck with me. I made an appointment with a lawyer 2 days later, not because I thought I was filing for divorce or suing anyone. I just wanted to know what I was responsible for and what I was not responsible for. I figured it would be an hour of expensive advice. It ended up being the smartest money I spent that year. The lawyer was a middle-aged woman with a calm face and a desk covered in neat stacks of file folders. She listened while I explained the account, the transfers, the joint expenses, and the weird new tone in the apartment. I kept waiting for her to look shocked. She did not. She told me to freeze my credit and stop funding any shared account that I did not need for rent. She told me to redirect my direct deposit into my own account immediately. She told me to stop covering anything that was not clearly mine or legally required until I understood the numbers. She told me to preserve every statement and every message. She told me not to threaten, not to argue, and not to announce my moves ahead of time. I remember feeling weirdly relieved after she said all that. It was the first time in days I felt like someone was speaking a language built on reality instead of feelings. I went home and did exactly what she said. I opened my payroll portal and changed my direct deposit. I moved my savings out of the joint picture entirely. I removed my card from anything I had forgotten was linked. I canceled the storage unit. I canceled the renter's insurance and replaced it with my own policy in my own name. I moved the phone line that was mine to a separate account. I changed passwords on everything I had been lazy about. I created a new spreadsheet for rent, utilities, and anything else that had to stay shared until one of us moved out. Then I stopped putting extra money into the joint account. I did not tell her I had done it. I know some people would call that sneaky. I call it the first thing I had done for myself in weeks. She noticed before I said anything. The first sign was that one of her purchases was declined at the grocery store because the joint card had run out of cushion. The second sign was that the automatic transfer she expected from my paycheck did not show up the way it always had. The third sign was that I stopped sending money for the little things that were not clearly spelled out. I still paid rent. I still covered my share of the utilities. I still handled my obligations. I simply stopped floating her spending while I was being treated like a suspicious landlord instead of a partner. She confronted me that night with the kind of hurt anger people use when they know they are losing control of a situation. She said I was punishing her. She said I was sabotaging the apartment on purpose. She said real couples did not keep score like this. I told her I was no longer going to fund things I did not understand. I kept my voice level. I did not raise it. I did not mock her. I did not remind her of every suspicious withdrawal. I just said I needed transparency before I kept paying for anything beyond the basics. She stared at me like I had insulted her by being calm. That part surprised me more than anything else. I had expected a big emotional blow-up. Instead, what I got was a cold, narrow look that told me she had already decided I was the enemy. The next week was miserable. She slept in the bedroom. I slept on the couch again. We communicated through notes on the counter, text messages, and awkward silence. She started talking to a couple of our mutual friends, and I could tell because one of them texted me asking whether I was really trying to control her money. That was my first clue that she had begun telling a version of the story to other people. Not that I knew exactly what she said, just enough to understand she was building a case. The phrase control kept showing up. That word matters because it was not just a random insult. It was a legal word. It was a word that could be used to frame a lot of ordinary actions as abusive if you stripped away context. I had no idea yet how far she planned to take it. I found out when I got served at work. That was one of the most humiliating moments of my life. I had been in a meeting about a product rollout when the front desk called me down. There was a process server waiting with papers. I signed what I had to sign, then walked back upstairs with my hands shaking just enough that I had to keep them in my pockets. The paperwork said she had filed for temporary protection from abuse and coercive control. That phrasing made me laugh once, but it was a miserable kind of laugh. The document claimed I had monitored her spending, restricted her access to shared funds, and made her feel unsafe when I asked where the money went. It also claimed I had gone through her phone, though I had not. It claimed I had threatened to cut her off if she did not comply with my demands, which was ridiculous because I had spent the previous week quietly paying the bills I was actually responsible for and saying almost nothing. I sat in my car after work and read the petition twice. By the second read, I was not angry anymore. I was sick, not because I feared being exposed, because I realized she was willing to turn my normal question into a legal accusation. I called the lawyer right away. She told me not to panic and to bring everything in. She told me this kind of filing was often used as leverage when a relationship was breaking down and money was involved. She also told me that a weak petition could still create a lot of trouble if I got emotional or sloppy, so I did the opposite of emotional. I went home, made copies of every relevant statement, and sat down with the bank again. This time, I requested full transaction histories going back months. I also got copies of our lease, the phone plan, the insurance policy, and the storage unit contract. I pulled my own pay stubs. I pulled the direct deposit records. I pulled emails from the bank about linked accounts and account access changes. I pulled screenshots of the transfers that had set all this off. Then I started matching dates. That was where the pattern became impossible to ignore. Every time a transfer came out of the joint account, it was followed within a day or two by a purchase or payment that was not household related. I found a series of cash withdrawals on days she had told me she was working late. I found online payments to a credit card company I did not recognize. I found one recurring transfer to an account in her name that was not the joint account. I found enough to see that the money was not just being mismanaged. It was being diverted. I did not know whether it was for debt, shopping, family, or something else. But the result was the same. The shared money was not staying shared. My lawyer looked through everything and told me to keep doing exactly what I was doing. She said the petition was thin. She said the financial records would matter more than the emotional wording. She said if the hearing went forward, I should answer only what was asked and never try to talk too much. That was harder than it sounds. When someone accuses you of being controlling and abusive, every instinct in your body wants to explain your intentions. You want to say you were just asking about money. You want to say you were trying to protect both of you. You want to say you never meant to make her feel trapped. But once you start defending your intentions, you can sound guilty even when you are not. So I prepared. I made a clean binder. I tabbed the documents. I put the statements in order by date. I highlighted the transfers. I made a one-page summary for myself so I would not get lost in the details. I also did something else that turned out to matter more than I expected. I stopped paying anything that was not absolutely necessary. I did not do it to punish her. I did it because I had learned the hard way that if I kept covering everything while she was building a case against me, I would end up financially and legally stuck. So I paid my share of rent directly to the landlord. I paid my own phone. I paid my own insurance. I paid the utilities I knew were mine. I gave no extra cash. I left no room for anyone to later say I had confused shared money with leverage. I wanted a clean record. The effect on the apartment was immediate. She became furious about the lack of padding in the joint account. She complained that I had made everything unstable. She told me I had changed and that I was cold. Maybe I had changed. I think most people would. It is hard to stay soft when someone is rewriting your behavior as abuse. A few days before the hearing, she left the apartment for good. Not all at once. It was more like a series of disappearing acts. First the makeup bag, then the work clothes, then the bigger boxes, then the kitchen items she had claimed as hers, then finally the rest of the things that mattered enough for her to want them. She told me she was staying with a friend while she got her head together. I did not argue. I just documented what was taken and what was left. I took photos of the apartment in case there were later claims about property damage or missing items. I changed the locks with the landlord's permission. I forwarded the mail. I kept the utilities on because I still lived there and the hearing was coming up. The apartment felt emptier, but it also felt more honest. There was less pretending. There was less waiting for the next accusation. I thought the hearing would be routine. I was wrong. The county courthouse was exactly as depressing as every courthouse in America has a right to be. The security line moved slowly. People looked tired. The carpet was ugly. The fluorescent lights made everyone look like they had slept badly for a month. I sat outside the courtroom with my binder on my lap and watched families, lawyers, and a few confused-looking people come and go. I was calmer than I expected to be, not because I was confident in some dramatic movie sense, because I had done the work. I had the records. I had the timeline. I had not shouted or threatened or done anything stupid since the whole thing started. That gave me something solid to stand on. My lawyer arrived a little before our hearing. She flipped through my binder one more time and said I was ready. She told me again to keep my answers short and factual. She told me the other side might try to make everything sound emotional. She told me not to take the bait. Then she went to speak with the courtroom clerk while I sat there holding my breath in a way that felt ridiculous. That is when her attorney came out. I recognized him right away because he had the kind of posture that says he has spent his life trying not to show surprise. He looked at me, then looked at my binder, then looked back at my lawyer. And that was when he said, in a voice low enough that it was obviously meant for the hallway and not the courtroom, that we should talk before this went any further. I will be honest. I smiled, not because I thought I had won something huge, not because I wanted to humiliate anybody. I smiled because I knew exactly what that sentence meant. It meant they had seen enough to understand the petition was not going to play the way they hoped. It meant they had either read my documents, looked at the bank records, or heard something from her that changed the risk calculation. It meant the story was no longer just my word against hers. It meant the facts were doing what facts eventually do when someone has been counting on other people not looking too closely. We stepped into a side room. Nobody yelled. Nobody dramatized anything. That was almost more satisfying than a fight would have been. Her attorney asked for a quick rundown of the financial pieces. My lawyer handled most of it. She explained the joint account setup. She explained the linked external account. She explained the pattern of withdrawals and transfers. She explained that I had already stopped paying discretionary expenses and had only continued to cover my own obligations. She explained that there was no evidence I had restricted her access to money because the account had remained accessible until I separated my own funds. She explained that the control allegation was going to be hard to sustain once the bank records were laid out. I watched the other attorney's face change in stages. First concentration, then annoyance, then the tiny, expensive-looking expression people get when they realize they are standing in the middle of something that should have been disclosed weeks earlier. He asked a few questions. My lawyer answered them carefully. He asked whether I had ever taken her debit card or passwords. No. He asked whether I had ever prevented her from working or leaving. No. He asked whether I had ever transferred her money into my own account. No. He asked whether the joint account was used for shared expenses or had been treated by both sides as a spending pool. Yes, shared expenses. Then he asked the question that changed the whole tone. He asked whether there were records showing money moving out of the joint account to accounts or payments that were not household expenses. My lawyer said yes and pulled out the tabbed pages. I watched him read the first page, then the second, then the third. He asked to keep copies. My lawyer said she could arrange that. He took a long breath and said something that sounded a lot like damage control, even though he tried to make it sound neutral. He said the petition had been filed quickly after a relationship conflict, and that his client had felt overwhelmed. That was lawyer language for a mess. Then he asked if we could discuss a voluntary dismissal and a clean separation of accounts. I sat there and let the lawyers do their work. That was the first time I fully understood that staying calm had already paid off. If I had exploded when she accused me of control, I would have fed. Story she was telling. If I had emptied the account without documenting anything, I would have looked vindictive. If I had kept paying every bill and hoping for the best, I would have been the one stuck explaining why my money was gone. Instead, I had quietly shifted everything into a documented, boringly legal shape. That was what gave me the stronger position, not anger, not luck, not revenge, preparation. The hearing itself lasted less than I expected. The petition was withdrawn. There was no finding against me. The judge was not interested in turning it into a therapy session. The order was dismissed without the kind of dramatic fireworks people imagine when they hear courtroom story. And honestly, that was enough for me. It would have been humiliating if the facts had not been on my side, because the financial part was bigger than just hurt feelings. It mattered that I had bank statements showing my own contributions. It mattered that I had proof of the linked account. It mattered that I had my own separate records for rent, insurance, and utilities. It mattered that my name was no longer exposed to the things she had been using as a shared cushion. It also mattered that her attorney understood very quickly that she had overstated things. Not because he was a saint, because he was a professional, and professionals do not like surprises that can blow up later. After the hearing, he asked to talk again before we left. This time, my lawyer and I agreed. He was more careful now. He said there were issues his client had not disclosed fully when the petition was filed. He said there might be a way to settle the financial separation cleanly without anyone dragging this into a bigger public fight. He said he wanted to avoid his client making statements in a courtroom that could be challenged by the bank records. That was a very polite way of saying the paper trail was bad for her. My lawyer told him we were open to a structured separation, provided the account issues were resolved and the shared bills were closed out properly. She also told him I wanted reimbursement for my share of the money that had been taken from the joint account for non-household spending, and I wanted the lease handled cleanly. He did not love that, obviously, but he nodded. That was the second satisfying part. Nobody tried to bluff anymore. I had no interest in turning it into a war. I just wanted my life back and my money accounted for. Over the next few weeks, the mess started to unwind. Her side returned a portion of the funds from the joint account after the records made it clear what had been spent where. The lease was negotiated through the landlord with a fee that we split according to the separation agreement. The storage unit was emptied. The phone line was removed from my name. The credit cards were untangled. The renter's insurance was replaced. The bank removed the linked external access after my lawyer sent the formal request. My credit report was locked and then unfrozen when I had confirmation that nothing else was sitting out there with my name on it. I changed the login info on the apartment utilities and put them fully under my control until I moved. The practical side of the breakup was almost more exhausting than the emotional side. People love to imagine breakups as one dramatic moment. In real life, they are mostly paperwork, boxes, and little betrayals by systems you forgot were connected to another person. There were also social consequences. A couple of mutual friends never really recovered from the story she told them. One of them stopped talking to me entirely. Another quietly apologized months later after seeing enough of the paperwork to understand I had not been the villain she had described. My parents were both embarrassed for me in that quiet parent way. My mom kept telling me I had been too generous. My dad was mostly angry on my behalf, which I had to manage because he wanted to turn the whole thing into a lecture about not mixing money with love. He was not wrong, he was just late. My brother, the one I had called first, was the least surprised. He said he had known as soon as I mentioned the phrase shared account that I was in for trouble. I did not fully appreciate that until later. The strangest part was how normal life felt again once the financial chaos stopped. I went back to work. I cooked in my own kitchen. I paid my own bills directly. I bought groceries without scanning for hidden weirdness in the statement later. I slept in a bed where no one was using my trust as a weapon. The apartment looked different, but not because I had redecorated. It looked different because it was mine again in a way I had forgotten mattered. About a month after the hearing, I got one final call from her attorney. He was professional as always. He let me know the account separation was finalized and there would be no further claims regarding the temporary petition. He also told me carefully that his client had decided not to challenge the dismissal or reopen the matter. There was no apology attached to that. There usually is not in the way people hope. But there was closure. That matters too. I wish I could say I felt pure victory. I did not. I felt sad. I felt embarrassed that I had not noticed some of the warning signs sooner. I felt angry that someone I loved had been willing to weaponize a legal system against me, instead of just admitting. She had been hiding what she was doing with the money. I felt relieved that I had listened to my lawyer and not to my ego. Mostly I felt tired. But the tiredness was different by then. It was the kind that comes after the danger is over, when your body finally lets you know it had been carrying stress for weeks. A few months later, I pulled my credit report again and saw nothing ugly attached to our old shared accounts. That felt better than I expected. I also got a small refund from the old joint account after the landlord kept the fees he was owed. I used that money to buy a couch that nobody else had opinions about. It sounds silly, but that couch mattered to me. It was the first thing in the apartment I bought without thinking about whether someone would resent the purchase later. I learned a lot from the whole mess. I learned that love does not make a financial system honest. I learned that a calm tone can be more powerful than a loud one. I learned that if someone keeps telling you that asking for transparency is control, you should pay very close attention to what they are trying to hide. I learned that being practical is not cold. It is sometimes the only thing that keeps you from getting dragged under. I also learned that ending every financial commitment quietly is not glamorous. It is not dramatic. Nobody claps. Nobody cheers. You just do the work. You close the accounts. You save the records. You stop funding the confusion. And then one day you are sitting in a courthouse hallway while the other side's attorney asks whether you can talk before this goes any further. That was the moment I knew I had done the right thing. Not because I had beaten her, because the truth had become impossible to ignore. I never tried to punish her after that. I never went after her publicly. I never tried to make our mutual friends choose sides. I just kept the records, stuck to the agreement, and rebuilt my own life with stricter boundaries than I had ever needed before. That part took time. It also took a while for me to trust my own judgment again. For months, every time a bill looked off, I felt that old spike of panic. Every time a bank app changed a screen layout, I checked it twice. Every time someone wanted to mix money and promises, I got slower and more careful. That was probably healthy, even if it felt annoying. Looking back now, the biggest warning sign was not the transfers. It was how quickly she turned a basic question into a moral accusation. Normal people say they are stressed, explain the expense, show the bill, or admit they made a mistake. People hiding something reach for your character instead. That is what she did. And once I saw that clearly, the rest of the story stopped being mysterious. It was just paper. Paper can be ugly. Paper can be cold. Paper can make a person look like a saint or a fraud depending on what is actually there. In my case, it saved me. Not because I wanted revenge, because I stayed boring, because I kept the proof, because I let the facts speak louder than the story she tried to tell about me, and because, when her attorney finally asked to talk before this went any further, I already knew the answer was sitting in a stack of statements he had not expected me to bring.